Hello, my name is Robert Edwards, and I'm one of the elders here at the Memorial Road Church of Christ in Edmond, Oklahoma. This quarter, the elders are presenting a series of lessons on Wednesday night entitled The Story of Jesus. Last week, Max Pope challenged us about the teachings of Jesus on generosity. And for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to present lessons on being like Jesus. At Memorial Road here, we do our best to try to live and follow the New Testament teachings. We try to follow the teachings of Jesus. We try to be disciples of Jesus, living and behaving in a manner that would be pleasing to Him. Our mission is simply this: to show the world what Jesus would look like if He was, and then you fill in the blank. To make it very personal for me, my responsibility, my mission as a disciple of Christ is to show the world what Jesus would look like if He was a 60-year-old man living in Oklahoma City. So I want to talk about over the rest of the time with us this week and next week what it means to be like Jesus. We're going to look at 10 different ways. We're going to look at 5 this week. We're going to look at 5 next week on simply being like Jesus. Because if we are disciples, if we are followers of Jesus, then we need to be like Him. And what does that mean in today's world? Well, number one, being like Jesus means having an active prayer life. Prayer was such an important part of Jesus' life, and it should be an important part of our life. Jesus prayed publicly, He prayed privately, He prayed short prayers, He prayed all-night prayers, He prayed with friends, He prayed alone, He prayed for Himself, He prayed for others. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we need to start our day in prayer. We have the example there in Mark chapter 1 where Jesus got up before the others everybody else was still sleeping. He found a solitary place outside and He prayed. Jesus prayed before making major decisions. He prayed at meals. He prayed for others. John 17 verse 20 says, I pray not only for these followers, but for also those who will believe in me because of their teaching. He's talking about me and you. So Jesus prayed for me and for you way back when. So if we're going to have an active prayer life, I want to encourage you to start your day in prayer. Pray before major decisions. Pray at meals and pray for others. It's been interesting in my life to see how my own personal prayer life has changed over the years. Now, when I was 20, I was a good Christian young man. Went to church, didn't miss a Sunday, didn't cause any trouble, but I didn't really need God that much. I knew who I was going to marry. I knew where I was going to live. I knew what job I was going to have. But by the time I got to 30, none of that had worked out. I decided I did need Jesus' help to find someone to spend the rest of my life. I had lost a job and I needed Jesus' help and God's help to find a job. And I needed Jesus' help and God's help as one of our little children was sick with a serious illness. So I went from 20 to 30 praying for the big stuff. I knew I needed Jesus in the big stuff. And then when I got to 40, life was in full gear. I had a full family. I had 3 little girls. I had a job. I was doing my best to move up that corporate ladder. Life was coming at me full speed, and there was just some days I struggled. And I needed to pray, and I needed God's help just to make it through the day. But then when I got to 50, I had come to the conclusion I needed God for everything. There wasn't anything that I wanted to face without God's help. I do my best to start every day with a prayer. I do my best to start every night by closing the day with a prayer. And pray all in between for every aspect of my life. My prayer life has changed over 20 years, and since I was 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, and I don't think that's probably uncommon as God works on us. As we grow spiritually, we change and we realize that if we're to be followers of Christ, we need to have an active prayer life. But moving on to point number 2, If we're going to be like Jesus, being like Jesus means having compassion on others. Having compassion on others. Compassion, you can find it just as this: sympathy for the sorrow or suffering of others with a desire to help. You know, if you look back at Jesus' life, he was constantly, as he went along, filled with compassions over the crowds, over the 5,000, over the 4,000, the sick and the lame that came to him, the two blind men that were on the road, the man with leprosy that wanted to be. Jesus looked at them and he was filled with compassion. And if we're to be like Jesus, then we too need to be full of compassion. I think there's really three keys to being like Jesus. But I want to begin just by asking, are you a compassionate person? Would others see you as a compassionate person that shows compassion with others? You know, sometimes I'm afraid we're just too busy, too focused on ourselves to see what's going on around us, to see the need of the things that are going around us. And that's where I think three keys come in. We got to take time to look and see what's going on around us. We got to open our eyes and open our ears to look and see at the needs that might be around us. And then secondly, we got to have compassion. We got to truly have sympathy for the sorrow and the suffering that we see around us. And we got to have that desire to help. But then finally, the third key, we got to do something. It's not enough just to see it, not enough to think about it. We need to act as Jesus did. One of the things I pray, as we talked about in number one, our prayer life, is for God to open my eyes and to open my ears that I may see what is around me. So number two, being like Jesus means having compassion on others. Number three, being like Jesus means serving others. I'm afraid, though, that many of us suffer from Whiffam disease. Do you know what Whiffam disease is? Well, it's a common occurrence through many of us. It's a disease that's entitled, "What's in it for me?" Whiffam. What's in it for me? We're not concerned with those around us the way we should be. We're concerned about us and what's in it for us. But Jesus calls us to be different than that. He calls us to serve others. We're very familiar, many of us are, on the Sermon on the Mount, but do you realize what Jesus did after the Sermon on the Mount? The Sermon on the Mount was followed by the deeds in the valley. As he left the Sermon on the Mount and traveled around the countryside, he healed the sick. He brought a young girl back to life. He dealt with demon-possessed men. A woman that was bleeding for 12 years. It goes on and on. He served others. Not only he taught us and preached to us, he got out and showed us how to live by serving others. And one of the most powerful things is the last night that Jesus was with his disciples before he went to the cross. One of the most powerful things, a lesson that he wanted his apostles to remember. So powerful. What did he do? He washed their feet. He got down on his hands and knees. And if you think about it, at the time, you know, they wore sandals. There were no paved roads. The feet were filthy. And so that job was left for the servants. And it was a dirty job. But that's what Jesus wanted his disciples to remember. He said, if I do this for you, then surely you need to do it for each other. If you're going to be a servant, then it's going to take your time. It's going to take, you're going to be inconvenienced. You're going to get your hands dirty. There's often not going to be any reward. No one's going to pin a ribbon on your chest. Nobody's probably going to pat you on the back. But through it all, as we take our time, as we're inconvenienced, as we get our hands dirty, even if there's no reward, we're driven by the fact that we have a desire to be like Jesus. And then number 4, if we are going to be like Jesus, it means that we're going to be committed to changed thinking and changed behavior. Being like Jesus means committing to change thinking and change behavior. The Sermon on the Mount called us to do that. He taught a new way of living. He taught a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving. He said, no, it's no longer an eye for the eye. It's turning the other cheek. And he said it's not just loving your family. It's not just loving your neighbors, but it's also loving your enemies. And he said, look at these birds. Look at the flowers. They're not laying awake at night worrying. If God takes care of them, God's going to take care of you. And then he reminded us, we spend so much time trying to fix others. And Jesus said, wait a minute here. Why are you concerned with your brother who has a little bitty speck in his eye when you have this great big log coming out of your eye? My dad tells the story. My dad was a preacher and preached for many years, and I sat through many of his sermons. And I remember many of his stories. So a story that I heard many times was about a young man who was in high school. He was a fine Christian young man, but his summer job, he wanted to be a lumberjack. And the reputation of this particular lumberjack camp that he wanted to was not the best. It was men that didn't have good morals, who God wasn't a priority. And this young man's parents was quite concerned that he was going to spend a summer in this around this influence. And his dad was concerned about that, and his mom was concerned about it. But nonetheless, they relented and let the young man go spend the summer at the lumberjack camp. And there, of course, this was many, many years ago, and there were no phones, and they were out in the wilderness. And so finally, at the end of the summer, the dad picks up the young man, and they're driving home. And finally, the conversation comes around, and Dad asks and says, well, son, how was it? Was it tough being a Christian in this kind of environment? And the young man looked at him and says, no, Dad, it wasn't hard at all. And the dad was a little surprised, and he said, really? He said, yes, Dad. He said, they didn't even know I was a Christian. How many of us, with the people we work with, the neighbors that we're next to, the people that are our friends, how many of them don't even know that we're a Christian? If we're to be like Jesus, it means having a changed behavior and changed thinking. But number 5, we need to, if we're going to be like Jesus, it means knowing the importance of forgiveness. Who can forgive sins but God? We need God, and we need our forgiveness of our sins. But we also need to forgive others. Peter was looking for the loophole when he asked, well, how many times are we supposed to forgive someone else? Is it 7 times? And Jesus goes, no, it's 77 times, Peter. And then in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gave us a report and reminder. But if you do not forgive men their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. We need to remember our forgiveness is contingent on being others. We need to know the importance of forgiveness. Forgiveness of others is such a powerful thing. It begins to heal the hurt that is there because of something that was done or something that was said. It diffuses tense situations. It brings relationships back together. And we can't forget that our own forgiveness is conditional on it. Preacher tells a story that he moved into a new location one time, and he noticed that one sister sat on this side and another sister, family member, sat on that side. And he thought that was a little strange. And so he went to visit both sisters, and they agreed that there was something that happened years ago that had caused a family problem, and they had never forgiven each other. Now, the interesting thing, neither one of them could remember what it was or the exact details, but they had never forgiven one another. So with his help and their encouragement, they forgave, and the hurt began to heal, and the situation became better. And lo and behold, they begin sitting on the same pew after all those years. If we're going to be like Jesus, it means knowing the importance of forgiveness. So just to summarize our lesson tonight, the first 5, and next week we'll cover another 5. Being like Jesus means having an active prayer life. It means having compassion on others. It means serving others. It means committed to change thinking and behavior. It means knowing the importance of forgiveness. I want to thank you for being with us tonight and invite you to be back next week when we continue our study of being like Jesus. Thank you.